There comes a quiet moment, not loud, not dramatic, when something inside you finally whispers, enough. Enough shrinking yourself to fit in, enough apologizing for your truth, enough abandoning who you are just to be accepted. This moment doesn't always erupt suddenly. Sometimes it unfolds softly in silence. You say no for the very first time, and it feels like you've broken a rule, disappointed someone who depended on your silence. You release a relationship that once felt like your lifeline. You breathe deeply and decide to choose yourself. Carl Jung called this the start of individuation, the sacred. Return to your true self after living a lifetime in the shadow of others' expectations. This is not rebellion, it is remembrance. You were never meant to be a mirror reflecting others' comfort. You were born to be a whole, authentic soul. For so long, you made yourself smaller. You said yes when every part of you screamed no. You gave until you were empty. You tried to understand others even when no one understood you. You called it compassion, but deep down it was fear. Fear of loneliness. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being too much. Then one day, you wake up to realize the price of betraying yourself is far greater than losing others. And so you begin. You don't become colder. You become clearer. You don't become selfish. You become sovereign. You don't stop loving. You start including yourself in that love. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were before the world told you who to be. Because when you finally choose yourself, you don't lose your light. You begin to truly shine. At first, saying no feels strange. Taking up space, speaking your truth without bending it to comfort others, it feels unnatural. You are trained to be agreeable, easy to love, to avoid conflict, even if it cost you your peace. But something inside you has shifted. You no longer want to be chosen for the version of yourself you pretend to be. You want to be seen fully, wildly, honestly, even if that means some will look away. Carl Jung wrote that we all wear a persona, a mask to survive society's expectations. It helps us belong, but over time it suffocates us. You can only fake yourself so long before your soul rebels. And that rebellion doesn't roar, it whispers clarity. It sounds like a voice rising from deep inside saying, I don't need anyone's permission to be here anymore. You stop apologizing for your feelings. You stop dimming your excitement. You stop seeking validation for what you already know is true. This isn't coldness. It's honoring yourself, respecting your time, your boundaries, your energy, not as something to earn, but as your birthright. The more you choose yourself, the clearer you see. Your voice was never too loud. They just weren't ready for your truth. Your needs were never excessive. You were just surrounded by those who thrived on your silence. Now you're done whispering your worth, done shrinking into safe versions of yourself that comfort others. Your life no longer needs permission slips. It needs your full presence, your truth. You exactly as you are without apology. At first, you think people will stay. You assume those who say they love you will celebrate your growth, honor your truth, and respect your boundaries. But then some pull away. Not because you changed too much, but because you stopped pretending. Carl Jung said reclaiming the self means breaking the unconscious contracts you made with others. I'll stay small to keep you close. I'll say yes so you won't leave. I'll absorb your chaos so you don't have to face it. When you refuse to honor those contracts, some feel betrayed. Not because you harmed them, but because they only knew how to love the easy, compliant version of you. Now you're real. You no longer laugh at what doesn't amuse you. You no longer say, I'm fine, when you're hurting inside. You stop giving endless chances to those who choose absence over presence. Suddenly, they don't know how to handle you. They say you've changed. They say you're distant. They say you've lost your light. But your light was never the problem. It was just too honest for those still living in shadow. Yes, it hurts to lose the comfort of the familiar, to watch people drift who once felt like home. But sometimes home was a cage, and now you're choosing freedom. You learn to love without losing yourself, to connect without performing, to exist without asking, is this version of me acceptable to you? Because the real you, the one beneath the mask, doesn't need approval. It just needs room to breathe. So when people leave after you choose yourself, let them go. They aren't rejecting you. They're grieving the mask you no longer wear. What comes next will love all of you, not just the parts that made others comfortable. You used to second-guess everything. Is this okay? Will they understand? Should I wait for a sign? You looked outward for permission, for a green light to be yourself. Now something has shifted. You no longer need permission because your intuition speaks louder than their opinions. Carl Jung believed the unconscious isn't empty, but a living intelligence, a sacred compass pulling us toward wholeness. When you align with yourself, that compass guides you. It speaks in subtle waves, gut feelings, knowing without proof. At first, following it feels reckless. But soon, it's the only voice that feels true. You stop explaining your choices. You stop editing your truth to make others comfortable. You stop filtering your feelings. Because your soul doesn't need consensus. It needs coherence. And then, life starts to change. You leave situations before being pushed out. You say no without lengthy apologies. You follow the nudge instead of the noise. Others might not understand. They ask, "What are you doing? Why now? Who gave you this idea?" You smile quietly, because the answer is simple: you did. You stopped outsourcing your truth. You stopped doubting your body. You started trusting the sacred wisdom within. This is the power of alignment. It doesn't always make sense, but it always feels like relief. You're no longer waiting for approval. You're walking in resonance. No opinion, no noise. No one can silence a soul that remembers its own voice. There was a time you called it love, the inconsistency, the coldness, the crumbs of affection. You felt too much, then begged not to leave. You held on thinking it was passion, forgave thinking it was loyalty, shrunk thinking it was compromise. Now you see it differently. Carl Jung taught that when we meet our true self, we stop being available for projections, ours and others. Many relationships we once called love were survival, need, trauma bonding disguised as devotion. Once you choose yourself, those dynamics become unbearable. What once felt like home becomes heavy. What once felt familiar tastes like betrayal. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear. You start to notice who drains you and who restores you, who listens to your silence and who talks over your soul, who respects your boundaries and who only stays when you bend them. You walk away not angry but clear, not to punish but to protect your peace. You stop romanticizing chaos. You stop confusing attachment with depth. You don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. Now you know love isn't loud. It's steady, consistent. It feels calm. It feels spacious. Anything less no longer belongs in your life. You don't grow colder when you evolve. You grow clearer. In that clarity, you only accept love that never asks you to betray yourself. You used to over-explain why you said no, why you needed space, why you felt what you felt. You twisted yourself into softness, logic, carefully chosen words just to be understood. But no matter how hard you tried, they didn't see you. Eventually, you realized they never wanted to. Carl Jung said when the self stabilizes, the ego stops defending itself. The endless explaining, the desperate clarifying, that was the wounded, self-begging for permission to exist. Now you've outgrown that. People who truly see you don't need explanations. They feel you. They hold space without a presentation. Those who keep demanding your defense were never listening. They wanted a version of you that served them. So you go quiet, not bitter, but respectful. Your silence is sacred protection. It says, "My truth is non-negotiable." You stop giving your soul to those who hear only with their ego. You stop pouring emotion into vessels that can't hold you. This isn't withdrawal, it's refinement. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're here to embody it. Those meant to meet you in that space won't need paragraphs to understand a sentence. They'll feel it. Because truth doesn't always need volume. Sometimes it just needs presence. There was a time when your peace depended on being understood, validated, hearing you're right. You chased clarity through others' mouths, tied your worth to being seen, chosen, accepted. But now something has shifted. You still walk a world that misunderstands you. You meet people who reduce you to old versions. You feel silence where connection once lived. But somehow you're calm. Carl Jung believed true individuation isn't the absence of conflict, it's the integration of it. Peace isn't when everyone approves of you. It's when you no longer need them to. It's quiet, internal, needing no applause. You feel it when you no longer chase those who left. When you no longer linger in misaligned spaces. When your solitude becomes sanctuary, not punishment. This peace isn't loud. It doesn't always look like joy. But it feels like home. The moment you exhale after holding your breath for years. The stillness after the storm of becoming. You no longer try to be palatable. You no longer translate your soul into a language others prefer. You speak softly not because you're small, but because your truth no longer needs to shout. Yes, the world may still not understand you, but for the first time you do. You walk differently, not faster, but freer. And that is what choosing yourself creates. Not a life without hardship, but a life with peace. Peace that depends only on your alignment. There is something sacred in choosing yourself. The world may not change instantly. People may still leave. Old ways may not fall away all at once, but something deeper begins to shift. Carl Jung taught that the outer world reflects the inner. When you stop betraying yourself, the universe responds, not with applause, but with alignment. New paths appear, synchronicities increase. Opportunities arrive as if they were always meant for you, not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying to be someone else. You become a magnet, not for attention, but for truth, for the people, places, and experiences that match your frequency. You stop chasing love. You start walking in self-respect. And love meets you there. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of the real one. The one where you no longer wait for the world to see you, because you see yourself fully, clearly, tenderly. When you choose yourself again and again, in small ways, in hard moments, in quiet decisions that no one notices, the universe takes note. Because that is what changes everything. You stop asking, what do they think of me? You start asking, is this true to my soul? That is power. That is peace. That is the self-awakened and unafraid. If this message touched something inside you, if it named what you felt but didn't know, how to say, write in the comments, today I choose myself. Let it be your signature, your reminder, your gentle revolution. Because the moment you choose yourself, you don't just find your path, you become it.